Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Tech Showdown. My name is Kevin. This is my co-host Teddy. I'm still feeling a bit under the weather, guys, so forgive me for that. However, today I have a really good video for you guys. It's going to be the Sapphire Tri-X R9 390X going up against the MSI Gaming 4G GTX 980. So this is a popular one because, well, a lot of people are trying to pick out of these cards for a lot of things, and I guess they're aimed to compete with each other as well. So let's first start with the GPUs featured in these guys. So in the 390X you get the Grenada GPU, which is pretty much the same as the Hawaii GPU, which is on the GCN 1.1 architecture. Whereas on the GTX 980 you're getting that GM204 Maxwell GPU, which a lot of people do like. So that means on the 980 you're getting 2048 CUDA cores, and on the 390X you're getting 2816 shader processors. Now, as far as clock speeds go, on this Tri-X 390X you're getting a clock speed of 1055 MHz, which is 5 MHz up on the reference, which honestly isn't going to do anything. So just keep that in mind. I don't know why Sapphire did that, but you know, whatever. Anyways, the 980 through GPU Boost 2.0, this one in particular boosted up to 1303 MHz, so that's fairly decent for a 980. It's pretty good there. So clock speed wise, this 980 does do quite well. Now memory wise, that's where we see one of the biggest differences between these guys. So the Tri-X 390X features 8 GB of GDDR5 memory on a 512-bit bus at 6000 MHz. So that is some serious memory bandwidth coming out of this guy, and 8 GB is plenty. It's pretty overkill for right now, honestly. But yeah, that's quite good. Huge amount of memory bandwidth, and that's in comparison to the GTX 980, which features 4 GB, which is still a pretty good amount for right now. It's probably the, you know, sort of like right amount right now, the sweet spot. And that's on a 256-bit bus at 7000 MHz. So you might think the memory bandwidth might be lacking pretty severely on the 980 because it's only on a 256-bit bus, but as we've covered a million times, the way the memory works on this guy means it's not as much of a hindrance as you may first think. Now TDP wise, the 980 wins big time there. 165 watt TDP coming out of this Maxwell GPU, which is very good for such a powerful card, and that's compared to the 275 watt, which is better than the 290X, which was at 300 watts, of the 390X. So 275 watts coming out of this guy, so that's quite a big jump up there, and that is something to consider as well when picking between these cards. If your power supply is kind of limited in terms of, like, well, maybe your budget's limited to what power supply you can get or anything like that, that is something you need to take into consideration. And just cost-wise as well, the 390X would cost slightly more, maybe like $1 a month more. I don't know how much it is. Probably not much more though. But the power supply thing you do need to take into consideration. Now let's talk about the coolers first, actually, while I got this up here. So this features the Tri-X cooler, which from what I remember from the 290X, this one looks a bit more beefed up. But as you can see, this is a huge cooler. True fan design. These fans are really good, nice and quiet, but get a lot of airflow through. And these just heat sinks, these aluminium heat sinks are just huge, and these 10mm heat pipes are quite big too. So this card has got one serious cooler on board. The MSI Gaming 4G is definitely more slim, that's for sure, but it's a little bit more fat. So this is their twin Frozer cooler, basically. You can see all those heat pipes coming out the top here, so that's really good. This fan design is absolutely excellent on them. It has improved airflow and, you know, improved acoustics, so I really like that too. And these heat sinks are very fat, so that's also quite good. And this cooler does do a really good job on this GPU. Now lengthwise, this 980 is coming in at 279mm long by 140mm wide by 36mm tall. So it's kind of average, a little bit more on the fat side I suppose, whereas the Tri-X 390X is coming in at 308mm long, so this is quite a long card, by 127mm wide by 42.3mm tall. So this is quite long, something to take into consideration depending on what sort of case you're trying to put this into, but as I always say, you might need to take out a hard drive cage if your mid-tower is on the slightly smaller side of things. Now with all that said and done, let's jump into the benchmarks and see how these guys perform. So the benchmarks are done at different resolutions, going all the way up to 4K, and in all of these games and synthetic benchmarks, everything is maxed out. So let's jump into it and see how these cards do. So as you can see there, it is a relatively close race in quite a few of these benchmarks. I was quite surprised. So like Shadow and Mordor at 1080p, they both got 97 frames per second. Then at 1440p, the 390X slightly pulled away, and the same at 4K. So it is quite a close race for the most part. I'd say that on average, just looking at all of them, the 980 does edge out the 390X in the majority of them. Some just by a little bit, some by a bit more. So I'd say that the 980 is still the better performing card over the 390X, although when you go up the resolutions it tends to get closer. But yeah, just looking at what the average would be, the 980 would still beat the 390X. However, the margin in which it beats it when compared to, say, the 290X has gotten a lot closer now, and as I said, in some of them they're scoring exactly the same. However, still a win for the 980 in terms of performance. However, let's jump into temperatures then and see how they do. So the 980 with that 165 watt TDP obviously does very well when it comes to temperatures. So temps wise, in the Unigine Valley benchmark on the Extreme HD preset, the GTX 980 from MSI went up to 63 degrees Celsius at 43% fan speed, whereas the Tri-X 390X went up to 67 degrees Celsius at 41% fan speed. So another thing I need to tell you guys is that the fans on this MSI cooler are turned off to, I believe, 60 degrees or maybe 55 degrees or something like that. I can't exactly remember, but that is something else to take into consideration. So yeah, pretty close there in temps, although the 980 wins again there just by a little bit. Yeah, 5 degrees, but 4 degrees I mean. But yeah, so a bit of a slight win there for the 980. It's kind of to be expected. But I think what's more amazing is how good these 390Xs and 390s are, and how much of an improvement they are over the 200 series cards in terms of the temperatures. I mean, we were never seeing cards getting into the 60 degree mark in the 290s and 290Xs. I think only one of the 290s I ever tested got into the 60 degree mark, which was a PCS Plus. Some of them got close at like 71, but the majority would be in like the mid 70s, mid high 70s, some of them in the 80s as well, and of course the reference cards went all the way up to the mid 90 degree mark. So I think it is still quite impressive for the 390X to do as well as it did in terms of temperatures, but again, it's a win for the 980. Whoops. So let's get into noise and see how these guys do. So at idle, the fans aren't even on this 980, and the fans are only at 20% on this Tri-X 390X. Actually, I think the fans might turn off on this too. Sorry guys, it's just, it gets confusing sometimes with all the cards. Some of them it turns off, some of them it don't. And a lot of you guys probably know that you can turn off the fans even if it's not done by default, if you really want to on certain cards. However, yeah, so noise-wise at idle, they both do very, very well. Which is kind of to be expected. They're completely quiet, you're not going to hear anything, so that's really good. But on load is what you want to know. So here is the Unigine Valley benchmark with it on the Extreme HD preset. So here is the 980 during that benchmark. And here is the Tri-X 390X in the exact same benchmark. So as you can see, it's pretty close there. Just from using them and in general, I'd say it's probably still a win for the 980, but it's not by much. It's fairly close. Both of them aren't very loud at all, and honestly, you know, even if you just have your speakers on like a medium sort of volume, it's going to easily drown out these graphics cards, or at least reduce it to just a bit of a hum in the background. So yeah, very good as far as noise goes. Which brings us now to the conclusion, and which one of these cards do I recommend to you guys? Well, we do need to bring price into the equation. So right now in New Zealand, the 980 will cost between $100 and $150 extra over the 390X, depending on what model of 980 you are looking at. So that you do have to take into consideration that this 390X may be $100 or $150 cheaper. In New Zealand, it's obviously going to change where you live. However, in saying that, in terms of performance, although the 390X does get quite close and some of them will do the same as some, the 980 does win. I have to give it to it. Temperature-wise, it also does win, although the 390X does do a good job. And noise-wise, it's close, but the 980 wins again. So really, when we take price out of it, the 980 is the better card. I know you only get 4 GB of memory with the 980, whereas you get the 8 GB of the Tri-X. That is something else to consider. But even considering that, the 980 would still be the card I would probably recommend over for the vast majority of gamers, anyways, because you're probably not going to be running out of that 4 GB. So yeah, if price isn't taken into consideration, then I would give it straight up to the 980. However, when we do take price into consideration, it's much harder to call. I actually don't really know which way to call this, because, you know, this 390X still does an incredibly good job and goes neck and neck in some of the benchmarks, and yet may run slightly hotter and be slightly louder, and of course it takes more power to run. However, that's still, you know, $150 less, which can mean a lot for, you know, someone who's building to a budget, or you know, can't afford that extra $150. And yeah, so it's really hard for me to say if it's worth it. So for this one, I'm going to leave it up to you guys to decide. I don't think I've done this before, because I can't actually decide. So now you've seen my showdown, and I want you guys to decide what you think is the victor when you include price into the equation. Do you think it's the, you know, slightly cheaper, well, marginally cheaper in some cases, but quite significantly in others, 390X, do you think this guy's the winner with its 8 GB of memory? Or do you think it's the 980, which did do better, and it did the same or better in most of the benchmarks that we did. It is cooler and it is quieter, although it only has the 4 GB. And I say only, but you know, the 390X does have 8 and this does have 4, and yeah, when it comes down to it, more is always better. So yeah, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments section below, and justify your reasons for why you think that particular card is better. Now, I thank you all for watching this video. Please subscribe to Tech Showdown if you haven't already, and like the video. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.